Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of the Penguin Teen Book Con chats. We are here today talking to some of your favourite authors. I cannot wait to introduce the panel that I've got. We've got bestsellers, we've got debut authors, we've got books that you are going to love coming out for this fall, and even some that are already about to be out or just out. So I will introduce the panel, but I'm going to let a few more people get on the live just so everyone gets their thing. I do think just realised I had my YouTube on in the background, so there you go. There's Felicity's first mistake of the weekend. Probably won't be her last. But anyway, guys, welcome, and everyone, feel free to leave comments. I will check in at the end. We will have a fan Q&A, and if you are joining us, of course, the very special thing is that you could win every panelist's e-arc. So we have a link in the description below where you can enter to win by turning up to today's panel. Winning is on your plate. So without further ado, I want to introduce the lovely panel of Get Your Thrill On, the Friday night special. Woo! We have got our lovely authors. We have got the lovely Lora Beth Johnson, whose debut novel, Goddess in the Machine, is out June 30. And it is a space epic adventure that's kind of like the best of Illuminae meets Marie Lu and Warcross meets everything. And for those who haven't heard about this novel, it is what happens if you were to go into a cryogenic sleep to head off to space and you wake up 1,000 years too late. Whoops. So from there, it goes really bad and great and amazing. So welcome to the show, Lora Beth.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay. My next guest is, I'm going to go down to the bottom, I'm going to go Jess Goodman, who's also a debut author, whose novel, They Wish They Were Us, is out this August. It is a murder, twisty thriller that is kind of like the 90s classic Skulls, for those of you who ever saw that movie with Joshua Jackson, meets Veronica Mars, and it's basically...
Pacey.
Oh, Pacey. We all need to love and remember Pacey. And it's this classic boarding school kind of Karen McManus situation where murder and mayhem and mystery is afoot, and who's betraying who, you'll have to find out. My next guest is Renée, who is, of course, the New York Times best-selling author of The Wrath and the Dawn, The Rose and the Dagger, The Flame and the Mist, so many, but her latest series, The Beautiful, as well, with The Damned coming out this July. Fans eagerly awaiting to see what happens to Celine after her momentous decision, and that's all I can say without spoiling it, but my lord, what a decision it was at the end of The Beautiful. And then my fourth and final guest is the lovely Alender, who is joining us as her new novel coming out this August as well, The Companion, is a fantastic thriller with a young girl whose family, unfortunately, she's orphaned, and she's sent off with a relative of a friend of her father's who may or may not want to take them into the family for reasons that aren't good for her, / could be really good for her, because who doesn't want to have a big country house that helps you look after people? But then there's a weird girl there. And it just is, that book to me too was one that I could not stop reading. It was an all-night page turner. So welcome everybody. Yay.
Thank you.
So I first of all want to ask you, I have so many questions, but my first question I have to ask is, to all of you, is all of your books have a tension and a murder and a mystery to them all. Who of you is a planner and who of you is just winging it and doesn't know how it's going to end? And I'm going to ask that first of Jess Goodman, because you have the most sort of almost, I feel like, I just imagine your house has a murder board, complete murder board.
It would make my life so much easier if I was like Carrie in Homeland, where I had like all of these little red strings everywhere. And I do outline before I write, but I really don't think that with this book, They Wish They Were Us, I was able to figure out all of the twists and turns and exactly who did what until I was letting the characters unfold on the page and until I was really getting to know them. I think it helps me at least to have like these really broad strokes to work with and these beats that I want to get. But, sometimes you just don't realize who the killer is until like draft 18, and that's okay. So that's kind of what happened with me.
Okay. Well, and then I also, speaking of creating that tension as well, is that Lora Beth, you also have a really intricate world plot that you have to keep moving along and pieces of the puzzle. Do you have like the world on your wall as well, or are you someone as well, it's in your head?
No, I usually start out with a first line and with like a concept, and where I want to get to. And then the entire first draft is pretty much pantsed. But then I end up having to do like a lot of rewrites to make things work. And the intricacy kind of grows with each draft. And so I'm planting new things in with each revision. But no, I don't plan it out as much as I should.
Well, and I will say, just interrupting briefly, speaking of people planning things out, this is sort of, your book is also, it's exciting and it's fresh and different. Did you also have plans afoot in your book, or was it something that you, as you told the story, unfolded before you?
Well, this book is different to me from my previous books, because it's a very personal and small perspective. The main character is so trapped. So the first draft I just wrote sort of from this mindset of being trapped and exploring this new place where all she knows about it is what she sees. So I went through the draft kind of with that mindset. And then in the revisions, like Laura Beth, I ended up doing quite a lot of rewriting. And that's when I start outlining and trying to organize things. So instead of outlining like the whole book, I'll do like micro outlines of like the next 10 scenes, and then I'll get through that and see if it worked, and then I'll keep going like that from there. But this was a really different process for me, because it's a really it's very psychological instead of having a lot of moving parts. So it was definitely, it was like a new experience. It was a learning experience, and it was painful sometimes for everyone, my family, my editor.
In terms of painful, did you change a lot in the process for you, or was it like the pain was just because it was just a good pain to get it out in that writing process?
It was, I don't know if good pain describes it. It was very painful pain. It was just interesting to have to put together an entire story where the entire mystery is centered around the way one person sees the world, instead of things that are actually really happening to other people. It's all based on what she can collect. And so that was really challenging. It was more challenging than I expected, but it was also really fun. It's nice to learn.
Yeah.
Even when you're old.
You can learn new tricks all the time.
That's right.
Learning new tricks and tormenting your readers. The Damned, the Beautiful, tell us about that in terms of, did you know where this was going to go after book 1 to book 2, or was there steps in the process that really came to you?
So like, it's so funny. Whenever people ask the plot or pantser question, always when I hear the word pantsing, it just harkens back to like gym class, that like quintessential bully or something like that. So I really like actually the way George R.R. Martin phrases this. Either says that you are a gardener or an architect. So a gardener plants seeds and watches them grow, whereas an architect approaches a project with like a scaffolding, a blueprint, and all this kind of stuff. I'm definitely, in that analogy, more of an architect. So I actually know where all of the subsequent books are going. I have tried actually over the years to become less of a plotter, less of an architect, because I feel like when you're I have these massive outlines that I work from. And it's usually because, and it's important for me too, because I have like sometimes 5 to 7 POVs running through any books. So I need to make sure that I'm keeping some sort of linear narrative going, or else I'll just like go off on these tangents, which I'll do when I'm talking anyway too. So you can see the mess that's in my mind. I really enjoy being a plotter, but I've tried to push myself a little bit more to be one of those authors who, they say, what is it, the car, like you can only see what's directly in front of you, like the headlights. You don't necessarily know what's around the bend, because I feel like it promotes organic like growth in the story and the narrative, and you just kind of are letting the story unfold with you. And I like that, because if I'm too married to a plot point and a character is pulling me in another direction, that's a really big challenge for me to stray from that, because all I see is everything else unraveling before me. So I have a lot of admiration for people who are the gardeners / pantsers, because I feel like they allow themselves moments of organic inspiration, and I love that.
Has there been anything in your books, and it doesn't have to be the beautiful, but anything in your books that you were the rigid architect from, but the garden took over? Was there something that took you in it, like you were like, this is what's going to happen to Bastian, guaranteed, and then something changed it?
Let me think. There were a couple of times where my editor, Stacy, definitely pushed me in a different direction, and I really appreciated it, even though it was a huge pain in the ass of Stacy. If Stacy's watching this, she's probably cackling. Because I remember the first time we talked about The Wrath of the Dawn, we had this 4-hour conversation on the phone, and it was wonderful, and I left it like so inspired. I was like feverish. I had like pit sweat and everything like that. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get into this book. But we were just like arguing back and forth about what to do with the characters. And one thing that she asked me to do was sort of narrative in The Wrath and the Dawn. And I was really resistant to that because I loved Yrsa so much. But now that I step back from it and have Yrsa's sort of narrative unfold more in The Rose and the Dagger, it was really where it was meant to be. So editors, we need them. Yes. Not always. Not always.
I would say that I'm very much a gardener on the first draft, but every subsequent draft I have to turn into an architect, right? Because it has to stand on its own. And then moving into book 2, which has much tighter deadlines. And also my book 2 is the end of the series. So like everything has to be tied up. I've definitely really pushed myself to be more of an architect. Has it worked? Absolutely not, but I'm very much trying.
I would say for Jess, as a journalist, have you found it difficult to kind of be? I'm guessing, is a journalist quite an architect? Are you now a gardener as an author?
Oh man, I mean, I think in journalism, one of the beauties of the work is that you often think that a story is going to be one thing, and then you do all the reporting and find that it's completely different. And you know that those are the best kinds of stories, I think, because you're kind of like you're finding out these truths that a lot of times people don't want you to know. So I think that when I write fiction, I always try to come up with an outline that I think is like totally impervious, and it's going to be like the easiest thing to work from, and it just never is, because I think it's the same kind of thing where for me at least, like I'm finding out truths about the characters as I go, and I think that I wish that I like had the kind of brain that was able to plot everything before, but I think maybe because I've worked in journalism for such a long time that my brain is kind of like, let's just see what else is out there. Let's just like play around in the mud with all this stuff and like see what we can build. But it sounds much easier to architect everything if you're starting from the beginning, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, I guess my next question for all of you is that this is the thriller panel, and so much of what you guys are all writing is the balance between tension, reality, obviously depending where that reality is, but also how far do you push it before it becomes silly, before it becomes the classic jump the shark scenario where you're like, no one's going to buy that plot, no one's going to agree. You know, have you walked something back? Renee, you've been doing this for a while. Is there something that you've written that you're like, I can't do that?
Well, okay, so it's funny because we always talk about like ruining suspension of disbelief, but then in our real world right now, it's so outlandish and wild. I mean, like you told us back in January that this is where we would be at the end of May or June or even in March. I don't know that anybody would have believed that. And if we'd put it in a book, people would be like, this is implausible. Like, you need to change this. So I've sort of started to get the idea that nothing is too nuts as long as you've seeded it properly throughout your book. That being said, I did have with The Damned, which it's probably the most racy book that I've written. And I had a really good time writing the sexy times. And I kept waiting for somebody to come in and be like, you can't do that. And no one did.
Yeah, I would like to personally thank the editor who did not step in, because those having read The Damned, yes, I get to read The Damned. It's very sexy and very good.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. I gave it to Roshni Shakshi, who is hilarious. She's one of my beta readers, and she's just hilarious because like anytime she reads like anything that's sexy that one of her friends has written, or as she tries to write something that's sexy, she just kind of cringes and she turns into this like giggling kitten, and she's just like it's hilarious.
Well, and I guess the same question for Katie. You're also sort of in a reality world. You're based in it's not a fantasy, it's not a sci-fi, a space opera thing. It's very much centered in this world. Is there moments in that story when you're trying to put a twist in there about you're like, it's too far, I've got to come back off the ledge? Is it you, or is your editor doing that for you?
I pretty much rely on my editor to do that. I tend, because one of the things that happens when you write horror or thrillers is that you can't always gauge the tension level in a scene, or like I've never been able to tell what was actually scary in my books and what wasn't scary. So I tend to sort of throw everything at the wall and have my editors be like, I have had an editor be like, the bugs coming out of the corpse is a little much. So I was like, not this book, but I was like, okay, I can see that. I just didn't know in the moment. I thought I'll just make it sort of as gross and horrible as I can. And that's, once again, that's what editors are brilliant at, is letting you go when you are going in the right direction, and then sort of corralling you when you're going in the wrong direction, which happens. I'd say I go in the wrong direction about 55% of the time. So.
Well, but for the companion, there's so much tension in what's not on the page, in the looks that the family give this girl as she's in this sort of big house. How do you write that in terms of the space of tension? Like, how do you give room to breathe there, again, without pushing it too far to, like, silly town?
I think part of it comes from the characters themselves. The most, I would say probably the character that brings the most tension is the mother, because she's such a buttoned up woman who knows exactly what she wants out of life and out of her children and out of her wards. And one thing that helps is that she's so smart that she regulates every situation she's in. So she doesn't go over the top. She doesn't lose her mind. She pulls back and leaves you feeling like you might be the crazy one. And so I think we've all actually known people like that in real life as well. So
very much so.
Yeah. So that's what I did. I relied on the characters. But I did try to keep the pressure sort of bubbling the whole book, because it's yeah, because in these laid back and relaxed times, we all need a little more suspense and tension in our lives.
Yeah, everyone's like, we're so calm and chill. Life's just a beach right now.
Yes.
Well, Jess, I think you also have that same balance issue of it's set in the real world, and it's set in a contemporary time now, but very much yours is almost verging at times, if you weren't careful, into like campy territory, because it's, classic Gossip Girl boarding school shenanigans. Did you again have to kind of walk the line of what was believable?
Oh yes. I can't tell you how many times my fantastic agent Alyssa or my editor Jess said similar things, where they were like, this is a little much. Like, I don't know if this would actually happen in high school, or like, I think you're putting these characters through like a little too much torture. So there were definitely some times where we to try to make it more believable and more realistic in a way that kept the story still really tense and really twisty and taut, but just in a way that felt more true to life, in a way that I think when you're writing or reading a story that's set in such a contemporary high school that like really plays off of modern themes, like I think you have less room to play with what could be believable or not if you really want to keep readers centered in that world, and that was really important to me. But yeah, just shout out to my agent and my editor for bringing me down to earth sometimes when I just really put these guys through the ringer. Yeah, sorry, characters.
Well, and I have to ask too, because your book balances that line between obviously the real world and the candy kind of fun, but there's another part of it too that, like, you look at the class divide of the rich kids and then the kids who don't have rich money or don't have access to money but are in that society. And with so much of that discussion happening now, is that something that's kind of, you've really had to carefully, walk that line of like what's appropriate to talk about, what's not appropriate to talk about, putting it through that lens of pop culture analysis? Was that obviously was intentional?
Yeah. I mean, I've been working on this book for about the idea for it started like 9 years ago. So even from the beginning, that was a core theme to this book, just playing with the idea of the haves and the have-nots at the very tippy top of the world. And even if you're in the top 2%, you can still be made to feel like you're not in the 1%, which is like just such it's so crazy making sometimes. And, I really wanted my main character, Jill, to go from being someone who thinks that she doesn't have enough to being the kind of young woman who can have more perspective and say, oh my God, look how lucky I am. Look what I do have. And setting that idea and those themes against a contemporary thriller just felt very true to life in these times that we're living in. We were going through final edits right around the time of the college admission scandal, like where Lori Loughlin was, Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman were getting called out for buying their kids' ways into college. And there is a really strong college admissions storyline through my book. And it was just, and that was, there before the college admissions scandal. But I think that kind of, to go back to what we were saying, just set it directly in our world where like parents go to extremes to do these things for their children. And also sometimes the kids go to extremes also because of the tremendous amounts of pressure that are put on them in everyday life from all angles. So it was really interesting to play with that. But I tried to be really mindful of, how it feels to be any of my characters who could be at any end of the class spectrum, and what those pressures meant to them in the context of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Felicity Huffman ruined a lot of the Felicities for out there. We're all like, you've ruined our name, Felicity. How dare you? How dare you?
How dare she? How dare she?
I mean, obviously the worst part was not ruining her name, but doing that and breaking the law and getting her kid in above others who deserve the spot. But Felicity name ruining us is a small part of that, and I count it on her ledger. Yeah. Renée, you also had to kind of, I think, with The Beautiful, really balance. There was a lot of balancing of obviously the paranormal aspect in it and all of that, but then Celine's journey and experience to get to New Orleans had a very real world sensibility to it. Was that something that you were really sort of treading the fence on, really, of what do I talk about that's based in reality, and then also this paranormal thing? How do I marry the two together?
I think I love that question. I think that it's really important when you have this really vivid otherworld sort of scenario going on as a setting, that you root the characters in very true to life experiences, because that's what's going to tie a reader to the narrative. Like as much as the fantastical might draw a reader in, at least for me, the thing that keeps me there, it's the character, it's their emotional journey, what's going on internally. And specifically with respect to Celine, because Celine was the character that for me was the most like me of any character I'd ever written. When I was drafting The Beautiful, it was during the time of the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. And I was just really, me and most of the women I knew had this seething undercurrent of rage going on. And that really shaped how I wrote Celine as a character. And the sort of inciting incident in The Beautiful is that she flees Paris because she has killed the boy who tried to rape her. And that was a difficult thing for me to write because there was so much of me in that character and the character's inner monologue. And unfortunately, I thought it was really important to put it on the page, even though it was a little uncomfortable. It was cathartic to write it because I felt like, first of all, we live in a society where 3 out of 5 women are unfortunately have experienced in their lives some form of sexual assault. And I wanted to go there and also write a story about it not necessarily being the defining moment of somebody's life. I remember somebody said that to me when I was a teenager, that I am not the worst thing I've ever done. I am not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And that was really profound for me to hear as a teenager, because everything just has this, like, it's up here when you're a teenager. Everything has this extreme level of intensity. And you think that, oh, my life is over. This has happened, or this didn't happen. My life is over. And it was really important for me to hear that as a teenager. So I wanted to write a character like that who wouldn't let the worst thing that ever happened to her shape her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love Celine for that. I think she's such a beautiful character in that beautiful line. You know, she's so empowered in her own choices, and I think you do such a beautiful job with it. Now, before I give you all the homework that I gave you, I want to remind everyone who's watching, it's going to be question time soon for you. So hit those comments, and we will bring the questions to the screen, and I will ask these authors all your pressing questions. So before I do that, I gave all of you homework, though, to ask each other a question. So I think our first student at the desk is Renee. Do you have a question for one of our panelists?
I do. I have a question actually for Katie. So I cannot wait to read your book. It sounds so fantastic. From what I gathered, you have written where a situation where the house and the setting itself is almost a character to you, which I love. I love to do this. It almost had this sense when I was reading some of the blurbs and just getting an idea of what you were writing, of this sort of like almost claustrophobic, like just, I don't know how to describe it, where the house was closing in on somebody a little bit. And I don't know if that's an accurate depiction of what you were trying to do, but I love that, because for me, setting is always a character. And I wanted to know what motivated you to do that and what that was like to write in such a very controlled, confined space.
Well, it's funny because when I was writing this book, the thought that someone could be confined to a house and not allowed to leave was sort of a new concept. And now I think, like, oh, big deal, you're confined to like a 50-acre country estate, like Crimea River. But I always try to make the settings part of the story, because for me that really is part of the reality of the character. And so when I was conceiving of this house, I mean, basically I just try to picture the creepiest possible house that someone could remotely actually live in and bring that to the page. And so because it's part of what's going wrong in her life, is being in this house. It's not just that she's in some random house with crazy things happening. The house is actually like a big cause of stress to her, because it's not a normal house at all. So that's what I did. I hope you find it successful. For Katie, I love too that part of the house's stress is that the Wi-Fi is not there, and that's sort of presented as it's fine, but it is the first screw that tightens that I'm like, oh no, there's no Wi-Fi. Yeah.
That would not be fine. It would not be fine for me. That would not be fine for me. That would not be fine for my husband. I'm starting to feel like it's not going to be fine for my kid either. So,
see, you would do very well in my book, because you would have just left.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Save yourself a lot of trouble and get out.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of wanting to leave, Katie, I think you have a question for Lora Beth as well.
I do. So I'm really fascinated by the idea of someone being in the future and sort of a fish out of water. And so you had to create like a whole new cultural language for her. And so what was it like to create like a sense of tension for a character when she's already having to interpret everything around her? Like, how did you find it challenging to create the thriller parts of the story when so much of what she's doing is so uncomfortable for her anyway?
Yes. So the way that I approach the culture that she finds herself in is through language, which becomes very apparent quite quickly, because the people that she's surrounding with don't talk the same English that she does, right? They because language has shifted, and so that is the cause of stress for her, not being able to understand people the way that she's used to, and then growing out of the language. Or actually the language kind of grew out of the culture, what their shared experiences are, and how this society relates to things, creating this language. And this the main difference between Andra, my main character's time, and this world that she wakes up in is that what she would call technology, they call magic. And just by switching the term, it switches or it changes how people interact with it. And so they see technology as this thing that's supernatural. It's sacred. It's something that they have this very this relationship that kind of puts it on a pedestal. Whereas when Andra sees technology, her relationship with it is it's a tool. It's something that we use. Right. It's something that we have control over. And so that is, a cause of stress for her. But when I was building tense scenes, rather than focusing on these very esoteric, let's talk about theoretical linguistics for a moment, instead of focusing on that, which isn't very tense. I wanted to make sure that it was all rooted in the physical grounding of the character. So when we get to high tense scenes, these very cerebral stressors that she's having, those kind of fall away, and it's down to a more primal stressor, running away from almost being stabbed, and things that are something that we can relate to, something that's very physical, because that's where tension lives, right? It lives in the body. And so making sure that I was shifting to focusing on the body rather than the brain.
Yeah. And I think you do that so well in Goddess, in terms of there is this amazing language world that's going on out there, but at the same time, you're just yelling at the page, "Run, Andra, run!" Well, and now, Laura Beth, I think it's such a weird marriage, but also for both of your books, I think it goes so beautifully. But you have a question for Jess, and I think you both have these sort of worlds that you're creating, and one is in space, and one is here in Long Island, New York.
Yes. So going off of that. So what do you think, Jess, is the difference between building tension in a fantasy world versus a world that is very rooted in reality and something that we're much more familiar with? What is the difference? And then how did you go about making creating tension in a world that's more, I don't want to say relatable, but something that's more familiar to us?
Yeah, totally. I think that you have less creative freedom sometimes when you're working in the real world, because you're working within the lines, within the lines of the drawing. Whereas if you get to create this whole fantastical world from your brilliant, beautiful brain. And I think that the tension when you're working in reality, I think, as we've talked about a little bit, is you're kind of limited in what is possible, plausible. My book doesn't have dragons or vampires or fantastical creatures, even though I love to read about them elsewhere. And so those demons have to be real people, which in a way can be scarier to the reader because they think it might happen to them. There are a few characters in my book who seem villainous at the beginning, and I think some of the feedback I've gotten is that they are scary and intimidating because they could be the people it's the boyfriend Graham who people think killed his girlfriend Shayla. It's his older sister who disappeared under mysterious circumstances only to return with a few text messages to our main character Jill. It's these people who and you live with and can hurt you because they can hurt you on the page because they potentially hurt you in real life. And so I think that, you know, when I'm trying to write scenes that build tension, I like to focus on the tiny moments between people. You know, like if I'm writing like a love scene, it's like, what is like the one spark that turns my whole character's, you know, body, turns her on fire, or like, you know, there's like a little spark somewhere. Like, what is the tiny tension there? And then of course, when we're writing these, you know, big battle scenes, which for me like take place on a Long Island beach, or like in a bedroom, like a mansion. Again, these tiny moments that are culled from reality. And I think it's just, for me, it's so much just picturing these places that I've been in my own real life, where it seems like when you're writing fantasy or science fiction, it's like you get to create these beautiful worlds that are totally unique to you. And I mean, that's just so cool too. But it does feel like, you know, exercising different muscles sometimes, I think.
Speaking of those different muscles, in terms of the people that you know, Jess, do you have a question for Miss Renee? That was a great segue.
I was like, are you talking about my guns?
The Beautiful starts with one of my like favorite opening lines ever, and I'm just gonna read it, which is it says, New Orleans is a city ruled by the dead, which is just like, it sets your brain on fire because you want to know why, you want to know how, you want to know how that relates to the story. And it's just so evocative and perfect. And I think you do this in all of your books. But what do you think makes a perfect opening line or opening scene for a thriller? Like, how do you decide to set the stage for the story you're about to tell and set up that suspense really early on?
Oh, that's thank you so much, by the way. I really appreciate that. As somebody who really spends a lot of time on her first lines, that means a lot to me. I think for me, the best openings to books are the ones that create as many questions as possible. And not like the sort of questions like, I have no idea what's going on here, why should I care, blah, blah, blah. But immediately you're like, what's happening here? And also it's about like the first lines. Like when I think of great first lines that are also extremely long, that whole Tale of Two Cities, you know, was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That sentence is actually an entire paragraph, and it sets a mood for you too. And I think that that's so important because you're understanding the author's, like the song that the author is singing to a certain degree. And I love that. And with thrillers, I love to see these like incredibly short first sentences that immediately just throw you into the fire, or these sentences that sort of drag out and have almost like a beat to them, like a heartbeat or like a rhythm to them. You just know you're going to feel this pulse, like either ratcheting upward, but all along just inexorably beating on towards the end of the book. And that's what I'm looking for, something that has music to it and makes you have a bunch of questions and also sets an immediate tone. That's what I'm looking for, and great first lines.
Good first lines are killer. Get it?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of questions, so let's get to them straight away. The first question comes from Shipper City, and did you all want to be authors, or was it something that changed for you? Was there some other dream that you had? And I'll start with Laura Beth.
I didn't know I wanted to be a writer until I was 28. So, like, I don't know. I tried a lot of different things in my life, and so I thought I would try writing because different things, and I sucked at it. Like, I was so bad that I wanted to put the work in better. Like, I was like, yes, I want to really stretch myself, and I really want to challenge myself, and that kind of felt like an aha moment for me. That's something that I don't like, doesn't come naturally to me. I want to put the work into it, and so that maybe should be what I do with my life.
And Laura Beth, before I ask everyone else the same question, there's a lot of comments about how great your bookshelf is. Everyone's admiring the bookshelf. So
I know the Funkos, they're so cute.
They're so cute. Well, and Jess, you're a journalist, as we sort of talked about. Did you think about fiction, or was it always just, no, I'm doing the magazine, I'm doing newspaper and print and digital and things like that?
Yeah, I think writing fiction always seemed like the fun option, and the option that was like not a career, or like not. I didn't know any authors personally growing up or in college, and I didn't understand how one could make a go of it as a life. It just seemed so out of reach. And I think journalism, I always knew I wanted to write, so I thought journalism, I was like, that's a career I know. I was on my school paper. I know how to do this. And I think, I worked at a lot of outlets that covered pop culture. I worked at HuffPost and Entertainment Weekly. And I think while I was at Entertainment Weekly, I was covering books, and I started to realize that people did this. This was something that people could do for, like as a side job or as their main job, or, the people that write books are real people too. And that's kind of when I took this manuscript that I had been working on in college and was like, let's try to do this also. And so that's how it worked out for me.
And Katie, always wanted to be a writer, or came to you later?
I did always want to be a writer. I didn't always plan on it working out. I went to film school, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and I started working in TV and production. And the entire time I was writing. I was writing at home in the mornings, or I would stay late and write at my desk after work. And I did try to find jobs that would help me to grow as a writer, even if it wasn't fiction or novelization. I worked in development, like a TV season, which helps me get an idea of how to grow a story. And I worked for several years writing sports commentary. And that helped me get into dialogue and really hearing a character's voice and being able to sort of speak in someone's voice. And the whole time, though, I was trying to apply what I was learning by writing. And then eventually I finished a book. And then for several years, I sort of didn't do anything with it. And then I was lucky enough to, get it sold. So at that point, then my show got canceled conveniently. So I was an author for lack of having anything else to describe myself as.
I think it was the universe telling you where to go. It was just go this path now.
It certainly felt like it. I think the emails crossed. I got an email saying, bad news, everyone. And then I got an email saying, good news. And I was like, okay. Yeah.
And Renee, have you always wanted to be a writer? I mean, you've had a few books now. Has it always been this career for you, or was there some dream to do something else?
No, I didn't always want to be a writer, but I was always writing. When I was a kid, I wrote a lot of self-inserts. I'm a child of mixed race, and I was really obsessed with Nancy Drew books when I was really small. So I wrote like Nancy Drew before fan fiction was a thing. I wrote Nancy Drew fan fiction and did like a self-insert with that. And it's just, it's something I always did. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, but now I tell different kinds of lies, so it's good. I remember whenever I decided I wanted to segue from going after a path of becoming a lawyer to becoming a writer, it was because I was writing in my spare time just for fun, to sort of have a creative outlet, because I've always been a very creative person. And I would finish writing at night, because I would always do it at night after everybody else had gone to sleep. And I would feel like I was editing my words in my mind. So I was like dreaming in words. And it was the first thing I wanted to do when I woke up in the morning was apply what I'd sort of worked through in my head, or a line would come to me as I was sleeping. And I would have at that time I didn't have the phone to just put it there, so just write it down on this moleskin notebook. And I was so excited to implement that into the draft that I had been working on. I was like, well, if you're dreaming in words, you should probably do something with this.
Yeah, that's the time to step on up to the plate.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next question comes from Undeniably Book Nerdy, and they wanted to know is, how do you keep track of all the little details of your characters or setting? So I'm going to start with Laura Beth again.
I don't. So a lot of it is rewriting. So every time that I go through the book, I'm like, oh yeah, they have blue eyes. Like I should probably remember that. So the rewriting is a lot of making sure things, check out. But a lot of thanks to copy editors and things like that. But yeah, most of my little details are floating around in my head, or even working on book 2 right now. I've noticed I've been opening up book 1 a lot to figure out what did I write? What was that book about?
You wrote destruction is what you wrote, is what I'm saying. As someone who's read your book, you wrote twists and turns, and people are not ready for this read, is all I'm saying. Jess, speaking of twists and turners, what about you? Were you writing things down, or how do you keep track?
Oh, me?
Yeah, sorry. I did.
I mean, I would love to say that I have like this beautiful character Bible with like everything about the people and like headshots of who I would wish to play them in a show. I don't. I think I think a lot is just stuck up in my brain because I've been working on this story for so long that these characters are very, I feel very familiar with them. But there were definitely times where I relied on copy editors to say, I think you made their uniforms this shade of blue instead of this one in this one mention. Like, let's check in on that. But I really admire people who have like whole character and world Bibles. And some of my favorite books like include those in the back, which I think is such a cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Katie, do you have a world Bible? Because I have a very clear vision in my mind about what that house looks like and where everything is, and that vegetable patch and all the things that went down there and everything like that. But do you have that as well? Did you have a Pinterest board of country estates?
I didn't. It was very clear for me. I mean, I was lucky in that the book has about 5 characters, so it wasn't that hard for me to sort of catalog them in my mind. But I have to say there was a lot of math. Mm-hmm. Because part of the history of the house is the generations of people who have lived there, and it became like the most stressful thing to be up at like 2 a.m. doing revisions, trying to figure out like, was it Edna or Maud who died in 1885? So I know I wrote it down somewhere, but I can't find where I wrote it down, which is sort of like a metaphor for my entire life. I tend to keep like a running notebook. Like I have an app on my iPad that is like a handwriting thing. So I tend to write things there. And if I do a good job organizing it, I can refer back to it. And if I don't, then I'll never find it again. But sometimes just writing it down helps you remember it. So yeah, it's all copy editors. They are saving us from ourselves all the time. If there's one message that comes out of this chat, it's that we can't do what we do without like hundreds of people saving us from ourselves. So
I love the nodding. Everyone's like, yes, copy editors, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And Renee, I know you've got glorious like Pinterest boards and beautiful fashion visions and things like that. Is it characters as well? Do you have the Bible? Do you have the maps? I know there's a beautiful map in the beautiful, but is that existing before it comes to the finished book, or?
So I do have a character Bible. It's useless. It's all of these wonderful, brilliant editors who, as soon as you said you had to do math, I was like, oh, I literally felt like my spine constrict. It was like, oh, no math. So it's great too, because I also have friends who are very skilled at different things in terms of writing books, and so I can always mine them for ways to help me fix this, come up with this riddle, because I'm not good with riddles. I have a friend who's really good with puns on other people to help make my books work.
Takes a village.
I feel like we need to have a panel after this panel that's just with the editors talking about what we've talked about.
No. That's like Vegas. That's like Vegas. No.
Don't talk about it. It's too bad. It's too bad. All right. Well, we are almost out of time, but I'm going to surprise attack you now because you didn't know this was coming. But I'm going to ask each of you to tell me a little bit, if you can, in 3 words about your book. And I'm going to ask Laura Beth. You're going to start us off for The Goddess in the Machine. Can you give me just 3 words?
Linguistics, Star Wars.
Ooh. Ooh. Ooh, that's so good.
You can tell she's into linguistics because she counted Star Wars as 2 words.
Yes.
The rest of us
I know. I mean,
cheated.
it's cheating a little bit, but I'm going to let it go. And for those of you who cannot wait to read Goddess in the Machine, it is out on 6/30, so June 30th. And if you wanted to pre-order, you can pre-order through Penguin Teen as well and upload your receipt if you're in the US and get a beautiful deluxe nail polish set. So make sure you check out penguinteen.com to do that. My next challenger up at the plate to name their 3 books is going to be Miss Renee. Can you give me 3 words, not about the beautiful, but can you give me 3 words about the damned?
Sure. Expectations be damned.
Oh. I like how none of you were challenged by this. You're all like, I'm ready for this game. It's great. And for those of you who are not so patiently waiting for The Damned, it is out July 7th. And we also have a pre-order campaign for that book. And you can upload your receipt and get a beautiful skull bracelet. So you can, it's actually beautiful. So you must enter that. Go to penguinteen.com as well. So that's there. Good job, Renee. Well done. All right, my next challenger is, I'm going to go to Jess Goodman. Can you do the challenge for They Wish They Were Us? 3 words.
Okay, let's go with twisted female friendships.
Ooh, that's a good one too. Look at you. I love how you're like, little swag to that. Yep, that's right. I nailed it.
I like it.
I had a little time.
And for those of you who are eagerly wanting your end of summer murder mystery twisty read, this is coming out August the 4th, and we cannot wait for this one. This is just one of those hot in-house reads that everyone keeps talking about. So that is They Wish They Were Us, and it's August the 4th. And finally, Katie, now you've had the most time to think about this, so no pressure. But
I'm going to do the worst.
But for the companion, what are the 3 words that you would say?
Oh, I can't do like a catchy little phrase because I'm terrible at things like that. I would say paranoia, loneliness, and secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do a pre-order campaign, my giveaway needs to be a spoonful of pins.
I don't know if we can send that. I don't know if we can send that in the mail. Is the only problem. There's a little bit of a legal issue with sending people.
Probably get in trouble.
Little bit. But for everyone who cannot wait to go into the companion, and I say go into because it's one of those books that once you go in, you can't come out of. You will be up all night. It comes out August the 25th. I want to say, yes, it is August the 25th. And again, it's that late summer perfect read. And I will say, again, it's one of those ones in-house where everyone was walking around going, what is wrong with this family? That was the constant conversation about, hey, what page are you up to? And people going, oh, I can't say anything yet. So the companion comes out August the 25th. So exciting. Guys, I want to thank you all for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to have you all on the panel.
Thank you
so much,
Thank
Felicity.
you.
Thank
So
you,
much fun.
too. This is awesome.
And thanks for everyone who's been watching and leaving comments. Now, I have been told that the giveaway at the bottom of the screen and in the comment section has been updated, so you can enter to win every author you see here's ARCs. So e-ARCs will be available, so make sure you enter. And it's only for those who've tuned in today. So you've got a really good chance to win, everybody, is all I'm saying. Thank you, guys. Again, all the books from these authors will be out very shortly. And you can find them all on social media, both on Instagram and Twitter. So make sure you tell them how much you enjoyed their chat today. We've got more panels coming across the weekend. Penguin Teen will be having a contemporary panel tomorrow with Ahdieh Karam, Arvin Ahmadi, and Nina Lacour. And then we're going to have trivia night tomorrow night. So make sure you join us for that. Can you be the ultimate YA trivia champion? And at that trivia, let me tell you, you can win every single book Penguin Teen talks about this weekend. So that's you want to be part of that one. And then we've also got a preview show for all of our 2020 titles and some spring 2021 titles this Sunday night. So make sure you get your TBRs ready and lined up, because you'll be able to watch that one and make sure you've got everything added to your shelf to read for the rest of the year. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you to my lovely author guests, and we'll see you soon on Penguin Teen. Bye.
Bye.